What did I want to get to, though? The main point of today's show is an update on what I'm calling the coaching carousel, because Tampa Bay got knocked out of the playoffs early. Florida did what Florida does. And I think a lot of people expected Florida to, in fairness, to win that series. But there were certainly some that thought, all right, Tampa's been knocked out in the first round, a couple of years. They're a good team. They have very good players. Could Tampa Bay push this to a Game 7? Could Tampa Bay make it to the second round? And when they didn't, the question then became, all right, is John Cooper's message starting to fall on deaf ears? And if that's the case, if John Cooper's message is falling on deaf ears, and if John Cooper and the Lightning decide that the most advantageous thing for them together is for them to part ways mutually, maybe the Flyers would come a knocking. And so there were a lot of people that got really excited for a very brief time. And I say it's brief because we're going to pull up what actually happened. But for a very brief moment of time, people started saying, all right, well, what if? Is it possible that the Flyers could go after John Cooper if he hits the market? And there are very attractive, there are attractive openings right now. The Rangers are an attractive opening, or they were. We'll get to that in a little bit. The Penguins, if you really want to go coach, the end of Crosby and Malkin could be attractive. I got some heat from the last episode in saying that I don't love Anaheim's situation. I got hit in the comments after the fact with, well, here are 5 players who are better than anyone the Flyers have or anyone not named Mishkov. I just don't think that the Anaheim situation is a great one. I don't think it's a great franchise. I don't think it's a sensational situation to walk into. And I think that Anaheim has also set a really weird precedent in firing their coach. He improved the squad by double-digit points. So firing him, to me, is indicative of is there an ownership clash? Was there a clash with the front office? Makes me kind of wonder if that's a position that you really want to walk into. So I'd say Rangers are probably number 1. Pittsburgh's maybe up there. The Bruins could probably turn things around pretty quickly. The Flyers' job has to be somewhere high up on that list. If you really like the idea of coaching Connor Bedard and you're willing to probably do another rebuilding year, which I assume is what Chicago's going to do, then the Blackhawks are probably a good option. Do you like the idea of taking over a Kraken team that could very well make it back to the playoffs next year, kind of improve a couple of things, a few tweaks, and you're a playoff team? Maybe. But this Flyers job to me is actually interesting, and it's not like a weird homerism to sit back and say, I think that the Flyers job is actually attractive. But you have a bunch of money that's going to come off the books after the 25-26 season. You have a GM and a president of hockey ops that are going to be given some more rope. They're going to be given the ability to go into this offseason to make trades if they want, to use as many of the 3 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks as they want. They're going to have the ability to go out and maybe offer sheet a player or two. And then next year, they're very clearly circling that free agent class. I think it's an attractive place to go. And more than anything, because I'm very much on the train that they're going to make enough tweaks to make the playoffs next year, there's nothing quite like being the guy who takes what is viewed as one of the worst teams on the ice, one of the worst teams results-wise, and then flips them from being number 4 in the draft lottery to being a playoff team next year. And as an ego kind of person, as a head coach kind of has to be, you have to love the idea of potentially taking a team from 4th worst up to whatever a playoff team looks like to you. So it's an interesting job. Now, I mentioned Cooper is out. Cooper was gone. And a big part of that, and we can go here. Let's go over to the report from Elliot Friedman, who confirmed Tampa Bay's GM came out, said John Cooper's going to be our coach again next year. And then they were talking about all the injuries, and this was put out by Benjamin Pierce, saying that the Lightning had a lot of injuries against Florida. Compartment syndrome, required a house call at 2 a.m., went to ER for surgery. You have an MCL sprain, an AC joint separation. Yanni Gourde had a broken finger. Hagel's concussion, Hedman broken foot, Kucherov left hand injury, Nick Paul left wrist tear. I mean, yeah, they were a beat-up team. But the big news is that John Cooper's not being let go. and that Tampa's not going to try to scapegoat him. Another guy that we expected to hear from sooner than later was Mike Sullivan. Now, for those of you who remember, I fucking hated the idea of Mike Sullivan being the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. I hated that idea with virtually every fiber of my being, and I kept coming back to the fact that, like, if you remember, towards the end of Torts' tenure, there was this thought that, like, maybe Torts would move aside so his buddy Mike Sullivan would get to take the job. Then there was a very brief time yesterday when it was thrown out there that Sullivan was going to go to the Rangers and that Torts might be an assistant coach or that Torts might go to the front office. That has since been snuffed out, so it seems like Torts might not be going back to the Rangers in any way after all. But Mike Sullivan is officially off the board. And I said earlier, of all the teams and all the openings and all the availabilities, the number one job in the NHL, vacancy-wise, was the Rangers' job. They are the team that are the most ready to win a Stanley Cup or to go on a deep Stanley Cup run. They are plug and play, ready to go. Now, were the Rangers a mess this year? Were there culture issues? Was Lavi scapegoated? Probably yes to all of those. But that is a team that has a ton of talent. Now, they do have a very weird situation with Artemi Panarin and the accusations that were made. And I don't know how that'll shake out. Don't know if the league is going to do an investigation into it or if they've already done one. But that's like maybe it's not a great thing. And they have guys that are up and down like Zibanejad. But you have Shesterkin in goal. And so just off the start, like, you've got a really good netminder, which means you have a very good chance of advancing pretty far in the playoffs if you can get there. Sullivan is a good coach. I don't know if Sullivan is a generational coach. I will once again reiterate what I said on Wednesday's show. Winning a Stanley Cup is hard. Winning back-to-back Stanley Cups is even harder. Doing that with prime Sidney Crosby and prime Evgeny Malkin makes things a little bit easier. And they haven't exactly done a ton in Pittsburgh the last few years, and I get it. Those two have gotten older, although Crosby's production has remained very high. Hextall's hiring out in Pittsburgh almost looked like an inside job from the Flyers. I get it. They haven't done a great job of retooling that roster and trying to give Crosby and Malkin and Letang like a nice kind of ride off into the sunset. But I haven't gotten a lot out of Sullivan these last few years. From a distance, it's made me say, oh, you know what? This guy is an elite coach who anything would be stupid not to interview. Well, you combine that with the fact that Tortorella was fired and they're good friends. And to me, it seemed very unlikely Sullivan was going to be the guy. So now he's going to be in the Metropolitan Division leading the Rangers. So if you were like me and you're like, I don't want Sullivan to be the coach of the team, guess what? Good news, he's off the board. Okay, so no Mike Sullivan, no John Cooper. Well, then you keep coming back to the guy that is the most tied to the Flyers, and that's Rick Tocchet. But he's not the only name. But we'll go to Tocchet for a second because Elliot Friedman put out on 32 Thoughts, which I did not listen. I don't listen to 32 Thoughts. Can I tell you, I don't like that show at all. I find it so unbelievably boring. Can I just... No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Russ, be a good guy. Be a good person. Be a good person. Don't say mean things. Don't say bad things about people that have a nice big platform. Don't say things about them. You shouldn't do that. You should be nice. It's a fabulous Friday. We're going to be nice. We're not going to say things that are clippable, that video guy Amadeo is going to do, and then I'm going to have to do damage control, and then I'm going to have to talk to people who are going to be upset that I can't give less of a shit about a lot of the national hockey shows. I love a lot of national shows in other sports, and I don't miss an episode. There are a bunch of podcasts to talk about the NBA that I am happily subscribed to, right? And I enjoy a lot of shows and content around the NBA. Hockey has such a void. And 32 Thoughts, this iteration of it where Merrick is on a different show, where he's got his own thing, and Friedman's still on 32 Thoughts, it does not do it for me at all. Merrick's show I've tried to listen to. That's not a must-listen either. Now, who the hell am I? I'm just a guy who hosts this show and hosts Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. But there's little to no entertainment value. So I don't listen to it. But the positive is that 32 Thoughts gets aggregated a lot. And so it was put out there that Friedman said that Rick Tocchet is the number one guy on the Flyers head coaching list, but that there's a growing belief that Tocchet's going to go back to TV next year. Now, I am going to continue to put this out there, okay? I'm just going to continue to float this idea out there, okay? My big question around the Flyers head coaching search is, are Danny Briere and Keith Jones going to be 100% in lockstep, right? You cannot afford for there to be discord between those two. They seem very aligned. They seem like their vision for the team is aligned. They seem like they together believed they were doing one thing. At some point, Torts no longer believed that, or something went awry with Torts, and those two said, all right, well, you're going to fuck off. And so Torts is gone. The reason that Tocchet has been brought up so many times is because he and Jonesy are close. If Danny Briere has somebody on his list, right, and he's the GM, but Jonesy is the president of hockey ops, are you going to end up in a situation where like Dan Hilferty or somebody else has to be the tie-breaking vote? Does Jonesy, as the president of hockey ops, get to make the hire over Danny Briere? Like, I would hope not. And I would certainly hope that, like, when all's said and done, these guys are going to be 100% aligned on it. But is it possible that the Flyers interview Rick Tocchet? They interview Pat Ferschweiler, which has actually been reported has already happened. It's also been put out there that Jay McKee, who was a former teammate of Danny Briere with the Sabres and has been a coach in the OHL with the Brantford Bulldogs, he might be in play. Is there a possibility that these guys can go through the interview process and maybe push comes to shove, one of them gets to kind of throw a little bit more weight out there and they make a hire? I don't know. I certainly hope that these two, at the very least, are the most aligned on it. They have to be. This offseason is so big for this team, and it's not like it's a single offseason, right? It's not like the decisions made in this one offseason for the Flyers are only limited to the upcoming season. The decisions they make now, whether to offer sheet a player, whether or not to trade draft compensation to go after a guy like Isaac Howard, whether or not they decide to use as many of those 3 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks on actual draft picks, those are going to be decisions that are going to have reverberations that will be felt for a decade. Not a year, not 2 years, not 3 years. This offseason is massive to this Flyers team. Their ability or lack thereof to move some money off the books between now and the start of next season, or between now and the start of the 26-27 season, is huge. It could fundamentally alter how quickly this team turns things around and how quickly this team gets to a place that they really haven't been for decades, which is a year in and year out Stanley Cup contending team. It is huge. They have to get it right. They need to get the head coach selection right.